Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Today we're taking a close look at a really compelling life and career.
We are. The subject is the actor Coy Luker Perry III, better known, of course, as Luke Perry. He lived from 1966 to 2019, and our sources today, they give us a pretty comprehensive overview of his life, his work, and the circumstances around his tragic death.
And that time span is so important, 52 years. It really forces you to look at how much he packed into his professional life. We're not just, reading a biography here.
Yeah.
We're trying to trace the deliberate path of an actor who experienced this just massive global fame and then spent the next 2 decades actively trying to rebuild his own image.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our sources really let us get past the headlines and understand the persistence and the pivots of the man who was, for one generation, the absolute icon of cool Dylan McKay on Beverly Hills 90210.
And then for a whole new generation, he was Fred Andrews on Riverdale. This grounding, beloved father figure. It's such a fascinating arc.
It really is. So our mission for this deep dive is to map that whole journey from his working class roots in Ohio through the absolute chaos of being a teen superstar.
And then into his time as this really dedicated, workmanlike character actor. And then finally, of course, we have to look at the medical crisis that ended his career just as he was hitting this whole new peak.
And we should say, given the subject matter, we're obviously going to be discussing a life that ended very suddenly. So we're going to approach this with a respectful, factual, and sympathetic tone throughout.
Of course.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, the foundation. Luke Perry was born, Coy Luker Perry III, October 11th, 1966, in Mansfield, Ohio.
Right, the second of 3 kids. He had an older brother, Thomas, and a younger sister, Amy.
And his background is, as you said, very working class American Midwest. His mother, Ann, was a homemaker, and his father, Coy Luker Perry Jr., he was a steelworker.
But there's a really difficult and formative event that our sources highlight from his childhood. His parents divorced in 1972.
And then, just 8 years after that, in 1980, his father died from a heart attack.
Yeah. And Luke was only 13 years old.
13. That's an incredibly difficult age to lose a parent. That kind of loss, it has to shape your entire worldview.
It really does. It can instill this fierce sense of drive, or maybe just a real understanding of how fragile life is. He grew up mostly in a small town, Fredericktown, Ohio.
And it's interesting, despite that hardship, he clearly had a bit of a performer in him, even back then.
Right. There's this charming detail from the sources. In high school, he was the school mascot.
Freddie Bird.
Freddie Bird, exactly. It's just such a humble, small-town starting point for someone who would eventually become globally famous,
It really is. And that desire, it seems, it translated into a massive goal almost immediately. Right after he graduated high school in 1984, he packed up and went to Los Angeles.
He did the classic story, go to L.A. to pursue acting full-time.
But this is the part of the story that often gets, glossed over. The Hollywood hustle was not glamorous for him. It was years of really grueling work and just pure persistence.
We really have to spend some time on this struggle because it gives you all the context for the success that came later. He wasn't just discovered. He had to survive.
And that survival meant some pretty tough, odd jobs. The sources point out a couple of really non-glamorous ones. He worked for an asphalt paving company.
And the other one, the one that always stands out, is working in a doorknob factory.
A doorknob factory. I mean, just think about that contrast.
Yeah.
You're a kid who's moved across the country to be a movie star, and you're spending your days pouring asphalt.
It tells you everything about his grit. But the number that really defines this whole period for me is the audition count.
It's staggering.
It is. The sources say he auditioned 256 times before he got his first real yes in 1988.
256 rejections. That's 4 years of just constant crushing no. It makes you wonder how anyone gets through that.
I mean, for most people, 20 or 30 rejections would be enough to send them packing back home to Ohio.
Absolutely.
To survive 256, you have to have a totally different psychological makeup. It's a fundamental refusal to accept failure.
And you have to imagine those odd jobs, the asphalt, the doorknobs. It probably reinforced that connection to the real working world.
Yeah.
It set him up for that workmanlike attitude he had later in his career.
That's a great point. And his persistence did eventually pay off. His first real work was on daytime television, which was sort of the traditional training ground back then.
Right. He landed roles on soap operas in the late 80s. He did a stint on Loving.
Between 87 and 88, and then he did about 10 episodes on Another World a little after that.
These were small roles, but they were professional credits. They proved he could, learn his lines, hit his marks, do the job.
And before any of that, there's that one great piece of trivia, a little pop culture footnote from 1985.
The music video.
The music video, he was in Twisted Sister's Be Cruel to Your School.
It's just a perfect little snapshot of that mid-'80s era, isn't it?
Yeah.
A strange, brief appearance, but it just shows he was willing to do anything to get in front of a camera.
Exactly. So you trace that path from school mascot to the doorknob factory to a Twisted Sister video to the soaps. It's an actor who is just in constant motion, always hungry.
And that hunger led him directly to the role that would. It would change everything.
It sure did. Which brings us right into the next phase, because the year 1990 is the absolute turning point.
The debut of Fox's Beverly Hills 90210. Perry gets the role of Dylan McKay. And his life, it just goes vertical overnight.
Dylan McKay wasn't just a character. He became a cultural archetype, didn't he?
He really did. The brooding, sensitive, rich kid with a troubled past.
Always on his motorcycle, wrestling with his demons. He was the perfect contrast to the wholesome Walsh siblings, Brandon and Brenda. He was the danger.
And here's a surprising fact for the sources about how he even got that part. He didn't originally go in for Dylan.
No, he auditioned for Steve Sanders.
For Steve Sanders.
Yeah.
The jockey, less introspective character that Ian Ziering ended up playing.
Can you even imagine that? It's just a classic case of casting directors seeing something in an actor. Some kind of internal conflict that maybe the actor themselves didn't even realize was their biggest asset.
They saw that quiet intensity.
That's it. That vulnerability under all the coolness. And that was absolutely essential for Dylan McKay. Steve Sanders was all external chaos, but Dylan was all internal pain.
And with that role came this. This instantaneous, almost violent shift in his level of fame. The sources call it the teen idol crisis.
And that's not an exaggeration. We're talking about a scale of fame that's hard to even imagine today, even with the internet. This was pre-social media, so the focus was incredibly intense.
He wasn't just a recognized actor. He became an object of mass obsession for primarily teenage girls all over the world.
The term teen idol really doesn't do it justice. It was a sociological phenomenon. He was suddenly one of the most famous faces on the planet to a very specific and very passionate demographic.
And we have a concrete example that just perfectly illustrates the scale and, frankly, the danger of that fame.
The shopping mall incident.
The August 1991 autograph session at the Fashion Mall at Plantation.
This wasn't just a book signing. This was a public safety event that went wrong. An estimated 10,000 teen girls showed up.
10,000. They completely overwhelmed the venue, and it was officially classified as a riot.
The crowd control just failed. The pressure was so intense, the risk so high that he had to be rushed out of there.
After being there for just 90 seconds.
90 seconds. Think about that transition. To go from this kid from Ohio who survived 256 rejections in factory jobs to literally causing a riot in a minute and a half.
How do you even process that psychologically?
I don't know that you can. It must have just crystallized the two sides of his new reality, you know? On one hand, incredible professional success. On the other, a complete and total loss of personal anonymity and safety.
And it seems like it forced him to make a choice. Do I lean into this, or do I fight to be seen as something more?
And he absolutely chose to fight. Even while he was the king of teen TV, he was already using that visibility to find film roles that would shatter the Dylan McKay image.
Exactly. He was using his downtime from the show to diversify.
Yeah.
He showed up in the original 1992 film version of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Right. But the bigger one, I think, was when he took the lead role in the 1994 film 8 Seconds.
That was a huge step. He played the real-life rodeo champion Lane Frost.
It was a much grittier biographical drama. It was so far removed from the gloss of Beverly Hills. It required a physical transformation, and he had to embody a real person in a really tough, dangerous world.
It was a very conscious signal to the industry that he wanted to be seen as a serious, mature actor.
But the shadow of Dylan McKay was just so long. And I think he eventually realized the only way to truly break free was to just remove himself from the source.
Which leads to that huge strategic move.
Yeah.
In 1995, at the absolute peak of the show's power, he decides to leave 90210.
Walking away from a hit show like that, it's almost unheard of. The sources are clear he left specifically to pursue what he called more mature roles.
It was a monumental gamble. For a teen idol, that's often career suicide. You're leaving the very thing that makes you famous.
He risked the huge paycheck, the guaranteed relevance, all for the slim chance that the world of independent film would take him seriously. It just underscores his commitment to the craft over comfortable stardom.
And during that time away, he really did work. He starred with Ashley Judd in an indie film called Normal Life.
And he got a small but very visible part in Luc Besson's big sci-fi movie, The Fifth Element, in 1997.
These were very specific choices, niche, challenging roles meant to show his range to critics and filmmakers, not necessarily to the teen audience.
But as it often happens, the pull of that original role was strong, and he did eventually return to the show in 1998.
Right, he came back and stayed until the end, in 2000. But the sources note he was listed as a permanent special guest star. It was a different status.
And it seems like in those last couple of years, he'd made peace with the character. He'd achieved a sense of ownership.
There's that great quote from him about Dylan McKay. He said, "I'm going to be linked with him until I die. But that's actually just fine. I created Dylan McKay. He's mine."
That's it. That's an actor asserting control. He's moving past any shame or embarrassment that can come with that kind of teen fame, and he's claiming it as his own creation. It's powerful.
And that sense of ownership makes his decision about the 2008 revival, the new 90210, even more interesting.
Right, because he didn't come back for that one, even though some of his original co-stars did. Shannon Doherty, Jenny Garth, Tori Spelling, they all appeared.
But not him. And his reasoning, according to the sources, was both strategic and deeply personal.
Strategically, he felt he'd already done the character. Creatively, there was nothing new to explore, but the emotional reason is really the key.
It all came down to Aaron Spelling, the original producer.
Exactly. He said, the difference between CW bringing something back and Aaron Spelling doing something is significant, and I cannot do it without Aaron.
Wow. So it tells you first that he was incredibly loyal. He saw the original show as this family unit that Spelling had created.
And second, it was an artistic boundary for him. He saw the revival as, a corporation leveraging nostalgia. His original work was rooted in a real creative relationship.
So by saying no, he reinforces this whole theme of his career, chasing meaningful work, not just a paycheck or easy visibility.
And that refusal, it just perfectly sets the stage for the third and longest phase of his career, the phase where he became the true workmanlike actor.
Which brings us into Section 3. This covers the period where he fully committed to diversity, doing dramatic television, voice work, even stage acting. Right after 90210 wrapped up for good, he took some really aggressive steps to shed that teen image.
The contrast couldn't be more stark. I mean, he goes from the glossy world of Fox primetime to the dark, complicated world of HBO.
From 2001 to 2002, he takes a role in the HBO prison drama Oz.
Oz. I mean, he played Reverend Jeremiah Cloutier for 10 episodes. The show was known for being just bleak and violent and morally complex.
It was the absolute opposite of Dylan McKay. And it was an early move into what we now call prestige TV, right? As that whole idea was starting to build steam. It was a signal to the industry, I am serious about this.
And he kept that momentum going. He followed Oz by starring in a post-apocalyptic series called Jeremiah.
He was the lead in that for 35 episodes from 2002 to 2004. A tough genre, a dedicated but smaller audience. It let him really hone his craft away from the mainstream spotlight.
And he continued with these ensemble dramas through the 2000s. There was Windfall in 2006 about lottery winners, and then that really unique kind of esoteric HBO show, John from Cincinnati.
These were shows built on writing and character, not on his celebrity.
Right. He wasn't trying to be a blockbuster movie star anymore. He was a reliable, committed character actor, and nowhere is that more clear than in his guest roles. He used those to really push the envelope.
This is where he really shatters the public image. In 2008, he does the season premiere of Law & Order, Special Victims Unit.
And he plays a rapist, Noah Sibbert.
That is just a cold, calculated choice. It is designed to completely obliterate any lingering memory of the sensitive teen heartthrob.
It is. SVU deals with such traumatic material. For an actor with his history to take on that kind of villain, it forces the audience to see him purely as a performer, capable of portraying true darkness.
He did something similar on Criminal Minds, where he played a cult leader, Benjamin Cyrus, for a couple of episodes. Again, diving into really complex, dark psychology.
But it wasn't just darkness. To show his range, he also did comedy. And he was willing to play against those traditional masculine stereotypes, specifically by taking on gay characters in sitcoms.
He was in Spin City way back in 1997, and then pretty famously in Will and Grace in 2005.
He played a birdwatcher named Aaron, who Jack McFarlane gets a crush on. I mean, a birdwatcher in Will and Grace, it's the total antithesis of Dylan McKay on his motorcycle, right?
Completely.
Yeah.
It just shows an actor who is confident and not worried about maintaining some cool image. He was just looking for interesting parts.
And sometimes the best way to use a famous image is to make fun of it. He did a lot of self-parody, especially with his voice work.
His voiceover catalog is surprisingly extensive. He was Rick Jones in the Incredible Hulk animated series in the mid-90s, and he voiced Sub-Zero in a Mortal Kombat cartoon.
Voice work is another part of that workman actor identity. It's about skill, not looks. But the self-parody stuff started really early.
Back in 1993, while 90210 was still huge, he voiced himself on The Simpsons.
Yeah, in the Krusty Gets Canceled episode, he played Krusty the Clown's handsome half-brother.
It was genius because it satirized his exact situation being so famous that his mere presence just throws everything off balance.
And he kept doing it. He was on Family Guy, Johnny Bravo. In the Johnny Bravo one, the cartoon character has to save him from a stampede of fangirls.
Which is a direct, hilarious nod to that real-life riot in Florida.
It shows a real humility, you know. You can't successfully parody yourself unless you can step back and see the absurdity of your own fame.
And beyond the screen, he also committed himself to the stage, which is a whole different discipline. No second takes there.
Right. In 2001, right after 90210 ended, he made his Broadway debut. He starred as Brad Majors in the Rocky Horror Show.
And he did theater in London, too. In 2004, he starred as Harry in a stage production of When Harry Met Sally, opposite Allison Hannigan.
That's a huge commitment, moving to a different continent for a long run in a classic play. And then there's the audio work. The sources mention his role in a huge dramatized audio Bible production called The Word of Promise.
And this wasn't just a small narration. It was a massive project with actors like Jim Caviezel, Gary Sinise, Marisa Tomei.
And in that project, Perry took on two incredibly heavy roles, Saint Stephen and Judas Iscariot.
To go from cartoon self-parody to embodying Judas, it just shows an actor who's constantly seeking roles with real moral weight no matter the medium.
It's proof that by the 2010s, he had completely become the serious, mature actor he set out to be all those years ago. And that transformation led directly to the final and really successful phase of his career.
And that takes us into Section 4, the return to primetime and his defining role for a whole new generation.
Fred Andrews. On the CW's Riverdale, he joined that show in 2017 and was a core part of it until his death, appearing in 46 episodes.
This role was, in so many ways, the perfect culmination of his journey. He wasn't the brooding teen anymore. He was the dad, Archie's dad.
The meta-casting is just brilliant. The original teen rebel returns 2 decades later to become the symbol of stability and fatherhood. Fred Andrews was the moral compass of that show.
He really was. In a show that was often so dark and stylized and surreal, he was the anchor. He provided the emotional grounding.
And it cemented his successful transition. He'd found a mature, consistent, acclaimed role that introduced him to a new young audience. He proved he had multi-generational appeal.
And while his TV career was hitting this new peak, he landed a small but very significant role in his final feature film.
Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Working with a director like Tarantino, that's a huge nod of respect from the filmmaking community.
It is, and the film itself is this deep dive into Hollywood history, so it placed him right in that context with this incredible ensemble cast.
And the sources note the importance of the film being released after his death and the recognition it got. The whole cast, including him, was nominated for a Screen Actors Guild Award.
It's such a powerful, almost poetic final note for his film career. The young man who left his hit show to find more mature roles ends his journey in a film by one of the most respected directors alive, getting a nomination from his fellow actors.
It really does feel like a fitting, professionally satisfying end to decades of hard work.
It does.
Okay, so to get the full picture, we need to step away from the career for a moment and look at the man himself, his personal life, his family, and a health scare that really shaped his later decisions.
This is Section 5. So in his personal life, he married Rachel Minnie Sharp back in 1993, right at the height of all the 90210 mania. They were together for a decade, separating in 2003.
And they had 2 children, who were clearly the center of his world. A son, Jack, born in 97, and a daughter, Sophie, born in 2000.
And his son Jack's career is really interesting. He chose a very different path. He's a professional wrestler.
Right, he performs in AEW All Elite Wrestling under the name Jungle Boy.
And the sources really emphasize how supportive Luke was of that career, which is so physically demanding and unconventional. It just shows his commitment as a father.
And at the time of his death, he was engaged to be married to Wendy Madison Bauer.
But his later years were really profoundly shaped by a health scare. This was back in 2015. He went in for a routine colonoscopy.
And that procedure, it found precancerous growths.
They were removed, thankfully, but the shock of that discovery, it turned him into a really passionate advocate for colorectal cancer screening. He started publicly urging people not to delay getting tested.
And that scare had a very direct, very practical impact on his life. It was a wake-up call that prompted him to get his affairs in order.
It really was. The sources are very clear on this. As a direct result of that health scare, he created a will.
And in that will, he named his 2 children, Jack and Sophie, as his sole beneficiaries.
This is just such a powerful example of his role as a parent. He proactively made sure they would be protected. It's a decision he made years before his death. It shows a man who really understood how unpredictable life can be, and he acted on it.
Which brings us to the final section of our deep dive.
Yeah.
The illness, his death, and the tragedies that followed. And again, we approach this with the utmost respect.
We have to stick to the factual timeline here. On February 27, 2019, Luke Perry suffered what's described as a massive ischemic stroke at his home in Sherman Oaks.
An ischemic stroke is caused by a blockage that cuts off blood flow to the brain. It can be incredibly sudden and devastating.
He was rushed to the hospital, Providence St. Joseph Medical Center in Burbank, but the damage was it was too severe.
He then suffered a second stroke while he was in the hospital. And at that point, his family was faced with an impossible decision.
They made the compassionate choice to remove him from life support.
He passed away on March 4th, 2019. He was 52 years old.
And the news just sent shockwaves everywhere. Because he was in the middle of this huge career comeback, he was so visible again.
His final resting place is also very telling. It reflects his personal roots. He's buried at the Perry family farm in Van Lear, Tennessee. He'd owned that property since the 90s.
And there's a really unique detail about his burial that the sources mention.
The mushroom burial suit.
The mushroom burial suit. It's an eco-friendly suit that is designed to help the body decompose naturally while removing toxins.
It's a profound final statement about his values, isn't it? A commitment to the environment and a natural return to the earth.
It really is. And in the aftermath, his projects and his colleagues made sure his memory was honored.
On Riverdale, where he was such a core part of the show, all the episodes that aired after his death were dedicated to him.
And then they went even further. The season 4 premiere was a full tribute episode dedicated to both him and his character, Fred Andrews.
That episode was incredibly moving. And it brought his career full circle in a way, because it featured a guest appearance by his old 90210 co-star, Shannon Doherty.
Yes, connecting his past and his present in this one unified, emotional story. It was beautifully done.
And his final film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, was also dedicated to his memory when it was released, and the Reels channel announced the documentary, Luke Perry, in his own words, so his story could be told.
So when you look at the whole picture, you see this young man from Ohio with this relentless drive who survives 256 rejections.
And then survives the trauma of just overwhelming instant fame.
It becomes so clear that he was determined to be defined by his entire body of work, not just by that one iconic role.
That quote you mentioned earlier, his conviction that he created Dylan McKay and that the role was mine, it shows him taking control of his own narrative.
Exactly. That iconic role, it was the foundation. It gave him the visibility, and that gave him the luxury to make choices. It paved the way for all those strategic pivots into prestige TV, into dark character roles.
And eventually, to his successful return as the patriarch of Riverdale.
It's a career that was tragically cut short, but it really underscores how an actor's commitment to reinventing themselves can have lasting power. He proved his versatility over decades.
And to have that work cut short right as he'd found these 2 new defining, mature successes, it's just heartbreaking. But it leaves you to think about how that early, sometimes burdensome fame can, in the end, provide the very freedom an artist needs to pursue a lifetime of more challenging, unexpected work.
A truly complex career and a life remembered with a great deal of love and respect. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.